Hi everyone, I'm Robin, and what I have right here is some Queen Palm Brandy. Last week, the Queen Palm wine batch 2 was actually essentially fermented out completely and ready to be converted into brandy. All right, so it's been another week and I have let the Queen Palm wines, both batch 1 and batch 2, sit and ferment. Batch 1 and batch 2 are completely different beasts. They both taste completely different, they smell completely different, they look completely different, the texture is completely different, they're fermenting out completely different. A lot of variables were changed between both batches. There's no control group here or anything like that. Everything that I did differently between batch 1 and batch 2 is why they are so different from one another. Batch 1, so much lighter. Also with the texture, batch 1, so much lighter. Batch 1 is super acidic. It's not just vinegar in here, there's a little bit of like a warheads aspect to it. So that's interesting. It definitely smells more acetic. And then you really taste all those other carboxylic acids that are in there. And I have a feeling that all those carboxylic acids might turn into really, really wonderful esters through distillation and maturation. Fingers crossed. There's some pineapple and some like honeydew melon. There's definitely orange and tangerine. Batch 2 is currently at near completion. The specific gravity is 1.004. There are a couple of bubbles, so I could let it continue to ferment out. But yeah, it's essentially done. It has such a strange flavor. First of all, it's ridiculously viscous. It's a little bit tart, very unique, somewhere in the realm of a fresh apricot, no longer dried. And yeah, it's really tasty. A little bit of that like crisp Granny Smith apple coming through. That tannic essence that I was getting last week is essentially vanished. It's not really there. It doesn't taste like a weird earthy mulchy thing. Yeah, it's kind of maintained the aromas that it had as I was cooking it down. So that's great. Hopefully those carry through when it gets converted into brandy. Once I removed all the Queen Palm fruits that were in the wines, it left me with about 2.4 gallons of wine in total at around 12% ABV. I think it is time to turn this wine into brandy. What I have in front of me is some white spirit. Ooh. So that means I took it to my lab and ran it through 2 different distillations. The first distillation is the low wines distillation with the goal of concentrating out the ethanol mostly, and then some of those wonderful flavors, and leaving behind everything else. After the low wines distillation, I ended up with just a little over 2 liters of low wines at 42% ABV. The second distillation is the high wines distillation, or the spirit run. And the goal of that is to further refine the spirit and really hone in on what you want to keep for the final spirit. So in front of me, I have 6 different jars. So I collected 6 different cuts throughout the distillation. I actually collected 7 jars. However, the first jar is the 4 shots, and that always gets tossed out. So these 6 are actually in contention for being kept and consumed rather than the 4 shots. And the way I decide on when to take different cuts, when to switch from one jar to the next jar, is dependent on what the spirit tastes like as it's coming out of the still. So when I sense that there's a little shift in the flavor profile of the white spirit coming out of the still, I will switch jars. So zero science that goes into that. That's all just tasting. I have a majority of the heads that I collected all in one jar because as it was coming out, it tasted super delicious. So this is the largest jar that I have. And now what I'm trying to do is decide what other jars to keep and toss in along with this hearts jar. So we have 3 that came off the still before that hearts collection. Then what I collected is a couple of little samples of essentially tails that came off after the hearts cut. What I'm working on right now is creating a tincture to see which of these I actually want to keep, which one brings some more flavors to the hearts, hopefully good flavors, not bad flavors. The first 3 jars that came off the still had a lot of solventy notes, a lot of nail polish remover notes. However, there are some fun estery flavors, so some fruity notes that go along with that as well. I have to see whether or not those fruity flavors are going to come forward more rather than the nail polish remover flavors when combined with the hearts. Similarly, the 2 tails jars that I collected, they have a lot more of these grungy flavors that are not so great. However, there are some fruity notes, some like funky fruity notes that come through that I'm just a sucker for. And I have to see if those notes come forward when combined with the hearts jar. The tails jars also have a little bit of like a low winesy taste, which I like to describe as like pasta water. That's what I get more of. Some people say it's more like wet dog, which it is, especially in whiskey, but these are brandies. So it's more of like a weird pasta water thing. I did 3 different tinctures. I'm just going to keep that hearts jar that I collected in the middle. It's really tasty on its own. If I add any of the jars that came off after it, it adds a funkiness to it that's not great. It's not funky in a good way. It's funky in a grungy, low winesy way. If I add any of the heads jars that came off before the hearts jar, it essentially gives it a nail polish solventy thing that I really don't like in white spirits. So this is what I got out of 2.4 gallons of Queen Palm wine. A lot of the flavors from the Queen Palm wine came through the distillate, and it tastes really delicious and has this unique taste that I was getting from the Queen Palm fruit itself. It has a lot of these interesting tropical fruit notes that live somewhere in the apricot, mango, banana with a kick of Granny Smith apple realm. It's almost as if the fruits that I'm referring to were stewed. It's got a little bit of mustiness to it and has a little bit of a tannic finish, but in a good way. It brings another depth of flavor to the spirit. Now I have to decide whether I want to leave it as a white spirit or see how it fares with a little bit of oak influence. But all in all, this was a really successful experiment, I'd say. Luckily for me, my palm tree outside has a lot more of these queen palm berries, which means I will be doing more batches of this. Concentrating out those a lot of the flavors from the Queen Palm wine came through. Why am I tripping on those words? Oh my God, I must be drunk. And don't forget to like and subscribe and comment and things.